It's coming, it's thinking
So
It's starting. Well, this might not happen today.
Well, we can go live from the iPad.
We can go live from the iPad, but we just tried that one time.
Well, the clip will be downloaded.
Okay. There we go. Okay. Sorry guys, running a little late this afternoon with some technical difficulties. We are Anne and Chuck from Admiral Cider.
so we're back.
Well, yes, the video flips it around so that we're on opposite sides. Left versus right. And we are here to taste through the July bottle bundle. So our bottle bundle this month was inspired by it being our birthday month. We opened in July of 2009, July 13th, I think specifically.
That was the
Grand opening.
That was the grand opening. The actual public launch was the 15th.
Okay. Well, so this month is our anniversary, and so we are celebrating with the bottle bundle that was the 3 ciders that we started out with when we first opened. So that's our Jupiter's Legacy, our Royal Pippin, and our Ragged Mountain. And we're going to taste them in that order. The first one here is going to be Jupiter's Legacy. So when we first...
Let me go through all this.
Go through the details. Go through the stats on Jupiter's.
Okay, so in 2008, we were building out. We got our license in the fall of 2008 and started producing cider. Not knowing exactly where we were heading. We had sources of apples. We had apples here in our orchard, and we had sources of apples from regional orchards here in the state. So, intrepidly started our venture in the fall, which we're picking our own apples. We were putting those in bins in cold storage for when we're going to press them, and we're also procuring our apples. So we retail some of these apples to customers, and so out of that we segregated out the ones we're going to use for cider. So everything we produced in our orchard went together in one tank. We have 200 and some varieties, and the ones that were best for cider, we pressed and put in our fermented cider. Those all went into Jupiter's Legacy. And I'll describe a little bit more how that happened, but we had enough to do a good portion of the tank for my own, so those went into our Jupiter's Legacy. We got a bunch of Albemarle and Newtown Pippin, so we were pressing those as well in addition to selling the apples here. And then we had some other apples that we were procuring in, like Pink Lady and Gold Rush and Demon and Wine Sap. The ones that we didn't sell retail were pressed into a tank along with the extra Pippin juice. We had 4 500-gallon tanks, and each one of them had a batch of cider in it. So we had about 2,000 gallons, which translates to about 865 cases I think we made the first year. About 175 of that was Jupiter's Legacy. So in addition to the apples that we produce here, there was some Pippin and some of these other apples got added in, maybe Wine Sap, to that juice. And we had one tank of just pure Pippin, and the other tank was mostly Pippin with these other apples added in. And so then we I was trying to figure out how I was going to differentiate product. Because you want things that taste somewhat different. And you want a selection, so we ended up with 3. And right away, I had a consultant named Michael Shaps, who you may have heard of. He's the owner and operator of Virginia Wine Works, which is now Michael Shaps Wine Works, but...
I think it's both. I think he does. He has both businesses, but yeah.
Whatever. Then it was just Virginia Wine Works. So Michael was my consultant the first year. He's a very accomplished and knowledgeable fermenter, obviously. So I needed someone just to guide me through the process, since I'd never done it on the scale that I was attempting. And right away, he identified Pippin as a very noteworthy juice. So I was operating from that. The rest of it, he was just kind of indifferent about. And then we fermented through all this stuff, and I filtered it. It was a 2-step filtering process we did then. And I remember the day he said, I told him the cider apples were all in this tank that had the Jupiters in it. And he was like the one-eyed me, but the day he tasted it after I filtered it, it's like, just put this in the bottle. So that's how Jupiters was born. I mean, I had no idea how I was going to create different products. So Jupiters was a one-shot thing that we did, and we've kind of replicated it ever since. So that's how we did Jupiters. So Jupiters has 20 to 30 apple varieties at least in it, and we've continued that right through the 11 years. And then the Pippin, I kind of knew I was going to do a single variety out of that. So we had a tank of single variety Albemarle or Newtown Pippin. And the others, I said, well, then we had 2 tanks. So it's Pippin and Pippin Blend, and I said, well, that'll be my 3rd variety, and we'll back sweeten that one. So that was Ragged Mountain.
Back sweetening is just adding sugar after
We had
fermentation.
sugar back to, we ferment everything to dryness, so we back sweeten that to 3/4%, 7.5 grams per liter. That was the first batch. We've kind of dropped that into 7 grams per liter now, but that's how Ragged Mountain was born. So we had to come up with a name for that one. So Ragged Mountain, we live in the Ragged Mountains.
We'll get to names as we get
Sure.
to each one, yeah. But that's kind of how things started out.
So those are the 3 we started with, and we've continued with those.
Mm-hmm. And so we're starting off here, for those who've just joined us, with our Jupiter's Legacy, which I would say we call our flagship. As Chuck mentioned, a lot of the apples in this come from our orchard. We started out as a tree nursery and had over 200 varieties of apples. And a lot of those, we don't have large quantities of, so there's a lot of small batches of apples that get put into this. It's more of a melting pot.
And to be honest, since 2008, we made a connection with the orchard in New Hampshire that produces English bittersweet cider varieties, and we were able to get juice from them from about the 2nd year. So some of that juice went into Jupiter's Legacy for most years. So it adds to the complexity, and so let me say about Jupiter's.
So it's a nice dry cider.
I wanted to say the pricing, we were pricing it since it was a little more eclectic. We were looking for a pricing differential on our ciders the first year, and we actually priced this higher at $18 a bottle. And it sold out fastest.
We had
So
much less of it too, I think.
we had some less. We had 175 cases versus 210 for the Pippin, and then so it sold fastest. Pippin was $16 a bottle, just like it is now. It was second to sell out. Jupiter's between July and Thanksgiving sold out. Pippin was sold out by Christmas.
It's a good problem to have.
And then the Ragged Mountain, since we had doubled the volume of it, was carrying us through the winter months, which were fairly slow, but we made it all the way back to May or June with the Ragged Mountain as our only cider the first year in 2009. But, well, no, that was 2010 by then. And then we've grown from there. So we're up to 20 some varieties now, and we're not trying to increase that, but we're trying
It's happening anyway.
We're trying to retract certain things and
We'll get there.
be consistent for the things that we're really good at here.
So the Jupiters, I would say this year it's a little bit lighter than it's been in years past, but still dry, crisp, a little bit of that complexity, some of that tannin from crab apples and Pavilion orchards. You don't add sugar back on this one, but I get almost like a sweet tart. Like I guess that's from the crab apples, or?
Well, I did sugar 1 year, I think.
But it wasn't this year.
No, it's the second year, and it fermented a bottle that we didn't know. I might have done it the first year, I don't know, but it was a very low level because that was going to be our dry cider, and still is. So,
yep, it's our dry blend.
After probably the third year, I quit adding sugar back to this at all. We were getting people who liked it dry, and I like it dry, so that's where it's sitting. So it's always been around 1 or less than 1 gram per liter sugar, which is brute.
According to the champagne labeling scale. This is one of my favorites. It's one of the ones I reach for quite frequently. Whitney on Facebook also is one of her favorites. The blend for this, so it changes every year because it's based on what apples.
Yeah. So I went back and tried to look it up, but it's I don't
a little
have
too
it.
varied.
Well, all I know is we had 8 bins of apples from our orchard that year. That's 160 bushels. And we added a bin of Ida Red, which probably came from Silver Creek, and we had a bin from Red Wing Orchard, which Steve loved.
Local guy has a small orchard and he's trying to find an outlet for.
So we pressed those together on October 10th. It's pretty early for us because a lot of these apples just got harvested around by the 10th of October. But, and then we added into that the Farnham Hill blend.
And then some from the orchard as well.
Well, that's up here.
Oh, I see.
This
Looking at
one-
over Chuck's shoulder,
So
isn't
there was another VDA blend that we had elixir.
it's the fermentation or the yeast.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then, there's a lot of details in there that are skipped over, but that's how this one came together.
How many, so you're talking about bins, how many pounds of apples are in a bin?
20 bushel bin is roughly 900 pounds of apple. And
900.
apples are
Some
40 apples. Officially, apples are supposed to be 42 pounds per bushel, so that would be 920 times 42 would be 880s, but it's around 900 pounds in a 20 bushel bin.
Gotcha. Well, we started a little late and I don't want to keep people too late tonight. We've got the, next on the list is the Pippin. I have a bottle up here. So it's, there we go. I don't know what it can. Don't know where the camera on. We're using a different computer. As mentioned before, we had some technical difficulties while starting. And so we're using a different setup than we have been. And so it's a little different. So this is the Royal Pippin. So 100% of the Albemarle Pippin apple. It was our first single varietal. It started the single varietal kind of theme that we do here at Albemarle Cider Works. So you said earlier that you chose to do Pippin as a single varietal because your consultant, Michael Schatz, liked it so much on its own?
That's one reason. I was looking for validation. We've done some single variety Pippin fermentations here in Carboy, and we liked it. But when I took the cider course up at Cornell, and I said, oh, well, cider needs to be blended to get complexity.
Common theme with cider makers.
Well, it still is. There are people out there that say cider, single variety ciders just don't measure up. I'm one to differ. They may not be. You may be able to create a more complex cider by blending it with some. You may improve something else by blending some of these things. I mean, that's where Harrison comes in, or Hughes Crab. You can make a lot of apples taste really good that would be otherwise a little bland by adding something with those characteristics in. So yeah, you can build complexity in, and there's a lot of dessert apples out there, and most of them would not make a good single variety cider. So
your dessert apples versus cider apples versus culinary apples.
Well, that gets confusing because Pippin is probably the #1 dessert apple in the country, according to Thomas Jefferson. And
like a Venn diagram, it can be 1, 2, or 3, but those are the three classifications: are dessert, fruit, culinary fruit, and cider.
We've talked about this before. You're looking for acid, you're looking for astringency or tannin, you're looking for sugar and for creating alcohol, and there's other intrinsic flavors like ketones and esters in apples, and they're different in different apples, and certain of these flavor characteristics kind of mask one another. So acid can override something, tannin can override something. You need them in balance. So the reason they say that cider needs to be blended is you want the balance. But there are certain varieties that have a balance of their own that just may not be the perfect balance, but Black Twig is one that I think makes a great cider. Arkansas Black, we blend some Pippin in with it to get the acid level up. So it's 75% Arkansas Black, 25% Pippin. And that's as far as I want to take it. But Gold Rush, Pippin, a pure Black Twig, Harrison, Hughes Crab, they're all like excellent ciders. And then there's some other, very few of the English apples are good single varieties. Kingston Black is one. I've heard. I don't have Porter's Perfection. That's another one. Beyond that, they have to blend their apples to get the balance. So Pippin has a nice.
I was going to say, I think this one's very well balanced.
It has a fruitiness. It's one that. It wasn't just Michael Schatz. We had multiple winemakers, and I call them respected winemakers here in Virginia, and I won't mention all their names because there's a lot of respectable winemakers here, but there was one that I know or considered some of the best winemakers here, and they came and tasted our cider, and just about to the man, they all walked away and said Pippin was okay.
Out of our first 3.
So,
well, it is very wine-like. I took, when we first started talking about doing a sparkling cider, the local community college here, Piedmont Virginia Community College, had some kind of little one-day workshops and courses on different topics. And so Thomas, who was the assistant cider maker at the time, and I took one on sparkling wine, champagne, prosecco, all of that. And so we were able to try some fermented juice. So this was specifically Chardonnay. It was an unripe Chardonnay that would have then been turned into champagne. And it was a dead ringer for the Pippin. I think it is very wine-like, the very vinous, the flavors is well balanced. It's got that acid fruitiness, things along those lines.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be, not everything has to be a home run. A triple is a really exciting hit in baseball, so this could be a triple.
Triple threat, good eating, good cooking, and good cider.
I'm just excited. And it's also, there's a nice source of them here in Virginia, so it's something you can replicate. That's the other thing. Some of the things we do are like a one and done for a few years until we can come back around. Like black twig, it's hard to get enough black twig with all the cideries in the world in Virginia now. And so black twig gets split up. However, and it's hard to do a single variety black twig. I will certainly do it again once the apples become available. Pippin has been available every year, and it's not only available to us, but it's one of the main apples. It's probably used, at least it used to be, by Castle Hill, and Potters uses it.
Most Virginia cider use some portion of
Blue Bee has access to it, yeah. So Diane Flint used to do, she did a handmade single variety Pippin, but she also used Pippin in her blended ciders. So,
well, it's a good base, definitely, for cider. And as you said, it's a little bit easier to get.
It's also they've done a national comparison, so our cider got compared with ciders from California.
Single varietal Pippin ciders.
Single variety. New York,
California.
New York, California, Washington State, I think, and then possibly there's one in Montana on there. So the Pippin apple, even though it's lost its culinary prowess, is still available to cider all across the country. And this one compared, trying to see if there were terroir differences. And I bet they are, I believe they are. It's remarkable. It is as similar in California as it is here.
Well, and there's got to be some fermentation differences too, and some different styles.
There's a lot of different.
Yeah, plus some other flavor components. So we call it our Royal Pippin after the Queen Victoria connection. I know we've talked about this on previous live tastings, but it does have quite a history. Something that a little known fact, I think, is that the reason, maybe not the reason, but it is quite prevalent in California, Martinelli's, which is the sparkling sparkling non-alcoholic cider.
I think they're actually making a hard cider too now, but anyhow, yeah.
Well, my understanding was a couple of generations ago they made it exclusively out of Pippins, and so we had quite a crop out there. The owner at the time really liked it.
Still young.
He might be, I don't know how many generations. He might have been passed down.
John Martinelli, he wasn't that much older than me, so
I've never met him.
we went and visited, but and he told us about what they were doing. They were keeping orchards in business because orchards are getting ripped out. This is before
the hard cider revolution.
Yeah, this was in like early 2000, so cider was still a recent phenomenon, and there were a couple. Woodchuck had started up, and there were a couple of there's Farnham Hill and West County, and a few others that date back to pre-2000. Most cideries in the country they might have been being thought of, but most of them have actually went into production since 2000 or 2003. We were 2008.
So we broke ground in 2008, and that was our first harvest year for cider.
Well, we were licensed. And so
Yeah.
Diane was licensed in 2005. She was the first in Virginia at Foggy Ridge. And yeah, there weren't that many.
From there.
So the fact that there's 900 to 1,000 cideries today is like phenomenal.
Well, I mean, as you said, when we started, we were the second cider in Virginia, and there's over 50 cider producers in Virginia. Not all of those are cider exclusive. Some are doing wine and cider and beer and cider, but there's quite a few people out there making cider right now in Virginia. So that is our Royal Pippin, fruity, bright, champagne-like.
And these apples were, this is a year later, these were 2016, the main Indian peas, so.
Would have been bottled in 17.
Yes.
Apples in 16.
That's correct.
Oh,
Usually.
you did a partial wild permit on this.
Yeah.
Interesting. Do you think that adds anything?
Didn't detract, so yeah, it may have. So I've done that before. Pippin, especially ones that are pressed later in the year, the yeast just want to go.
To take off.
And it's hard to slow the thing down, so it's like, yeah. And I do feed it. I do some of the protocols for cultured yeast, but when it's going as fast as it was, I didn't feel like I should throw yeast in that. Just monitor and make sure it doesn't start to get off flavors.
Which has happened, but not with this batch. It's quite good. We swap up here to our Ragged Mountain, which I still don't know where the camera is in this thing. We usually use my computer, which is it's not doing very well right now. I have a new one on the way, but so we're it's something, and so we're just trying to limp along on our tasting room manager's computer, which I think your computer is older than mine. I don't know how. It's like a rock. You can't mess it up.
It didn't sandblast.
Anyway, my computer was 6 years old. It lasted for quite a while, but it's on its last leg, so we had to switch up tonight. So we're doing Ragged Mountain, and this is the third of the three that we're trying tonight, and the sweetest of what we're trying tonight. So I think, as Chuck mentioned earlier, it's got about 0.7% residual sugar after fermentation.
8 grams per liter.
8 grams per liter this year.
Well, in 2015.
Yeah. So a little bit less dry. Although Chuck and I took a sensory class back like 8 or 9 years ago now, wasn't it?
You up there?
Yeah. With Bruce Auckland, who used to be the enologist over at Virginia Tech, and he used to do sensory workshops around before he retired. And at 0.7% is about the level that most human palates can differentiate sweetness.
Below 0.7 is subliminal.
So you perceive it as...
You may perceive some difference, but you would not, you could put 0.3, 0.4, 0.5%, and you couldn't tell the difference. Most people.
Well, I think some of it, you wouldn't perceive it as sweetness. You might perceive it as
you
body or as acid, but not necessarily as sweetness.
You might perceive it as sweet, but you couldn't tell the difference. Once it gets to 0.7 or 7 grams per liter, you start to be able to, in the human tongue, and most people can start tasting the sweetness, and you can differentiate, say, between 7 grams per liter and 10 grams per liter, perhaps. So it becomes more of a, it's just so
This is right on the cusp of that then.
Yeah.
not sweet per se, but a little less dry than the other two.
Just too much sugar to
Well, that's the other thing. The sugar does round over the action, so that's why we first started doing our Jupiter's Legacy and our Pippin and our first Gold Rush. We did some back sweetening, but I don't know why it's different now, but I find Gold Rush fine straight out of the tank, and we don't back sweeten that one.
Not anymore. There was one year it fermented out to a higher residual sugar, but that was a couple years ago. Different cider. So the Ragged Mountain, Chuck had started going into the name. It's named after the Ragged Mountain chain here that ends here in Charlottesville.
So this one was a blend of a couple things. We had a blend that we did very early on, and it was our fresh juice for that year. And in it, was 50% of it was like Suncrest. And then there was a lesser amount of York, and then there was some Virginia Gold and a couple other things like maybe Stamen and Winesap. And then
Suncrest is a newer apple, right? It tastes a little bit like Gold Rush, a little bit sweeter than Gold Rush, but similar acid.
I don't know if it's dry acid. No, it's not, but it looks similar. But and then the second half of this was it was a blend that was predominantly a Pippin, about 8%, and then there was there was 4 or 5 other apples in that one. So there's quite a bit of diversity in this in terms of apples, and it is back sweetened. So
where Jupiter's the blend is it's the dry blend, it varies year to year. Ragged Mountain is the off dry blend, and just varies year to year depending on what's available. But I really like this year actually. I've have been enjoying it quite a bit. I'm not usually a fan of sweeter ciders, not that this one's that sweet, but our Ragged Mountain and our Palmary I usually don't reach for first unless it has orange juice in it.
Yeah. So,
but I will say this one, especially in the hot summer days, really great porch cider.
So when we were trying to describe this in our first year, we had some help from some of our friends, and this was from Gail Page, who's Fairmont Orange Cheese, and fairly well-known and accomplished chef, and she described this as every man's cider.
Perfect.
Everybody can like this. Even people that like dry, it's not too sweet, and someone who likes Jupiter's can actually tolerate this. Whereas you get much sweeter and they'll turn off. So.
Do you think that has to do with the sweetness being right at the cusp of
the human? Yeah, the lower you keep it, you've got to draw there's a bell-shaped curve of taste. It may be skewed somehow one way or another, but it's basically a bell-shaped curve. 50% of the people like sweet, and 50% would prefer it drier. So if you can catch somewhere in the bell curve, you've got a bunch of people on both ways. So you've got everybody you'll lose them way out on the tail. So the people that like Pepsi Cola, only like my mom, she didn't really like cider, but if she drank any cider, it'd be the sweetest one. And the people that only like black coffee and dark chocolate and very dry and like a lot of other things that most people won't tolerate, they might not drink it. But you've got 75 to 80% of the drinking population that would favor this over some of the other stuff.
So going in, since we're getting into kind of some of these tasting things and human palates, what Chuck's talking about is there's a science out there that talks about super tasters versus so people who are hypersensitive to taste, and those are the people that actually prefer sweeter things and things that are not bitter, things that are not overly sharp, versus the the people that can do coffee and dark chocolate and all those things. I like Chuck. Ideally, they're or not ideally, but on this scale, they're actually. It's not that they don't have as sharp of a palate; they just aren't as sensitive to bitterness and to certain tastes. And so that's the kind of bell curve that Chuck's talking about.
So anyhow, whoever you are, whatever your taste is, you don't have to pay any attention to what I say or what Ann says. You drink what you like.
Drink what you like.
And
that's also a blogger. If you look him up,
sure.
Frank Morgan, drink what you like.
But yeah,
it's a good thing to check out.
And I don't listen to all the culinary guidelines about red and white wine either, but whatever. It's, if you like something, that's the one you need. You don't want to be sitting here trying to force yourself to like something because someone else likes it. So I hope you like some of these.
Well, this was a wide range, actually. Some of the bundles that we tasted through have been a little bit different. This really did cover kind of a full range for us. I'm sorry about the glare, you guys. The sun is setting, and we're getting nice and sunshine here.
Look at this. He's got it too.
That time of day. All three of these. I'm usually not actually a big fan of Pippin, and all three of these, it really was a nice.
Too young, we'll learn yet.
There's none of ours that I don't like. I would say that there's some that I reach for more readily than others. What are the ones that you reach for more readily, other than Arkansas Black? Because that's always.
We've got a bunch now. You can't, from my taste perspective, Wixon, Harrison, Hughes Crab, 1817, Black Twig, Arkansas Black, Wine Sap.
So basically all of them.
Pretty much. CC5, actually CC4, the rest of them. I even like the CC1, which is Abigail. I know you didn't always like that, but
it's mellowed in the bottle a little bit. I do like it more now. It was a little funky when we first.
Our rosé that we just released. I drank a couple bottles of that this last week.
We don't have a lot of it, so get it quick. Yeah. Right now we've got it available for insiders, but we don't have a lot of that and enjoying it.
It's in a 500, so you can easily drink a bottle floating in the pond. So, the Jupiters.
Well, we're hoping, so next month what we're looking at, I think, is doing Wixon and CC5, since Cider Maker's Choice number 5 has Wixon in it. And so we thought it was single varietal versus the blend, even though they're different years.
Yeah. Well, the Wixon's buried way deep in the mountains. So.
It's about 13%. We looked it up.
Okay. So some of our Jupiters have Wixon in it, but I don't know which ones, so don't even try to. We actually started writing some of the stuff down, and I don't know, we may have written this down. I don't have this in my logbook.
No, I could have shown you.
We didn't write down everything. Did we press that down? I just know we pressed 8 bins. So in those 8 bins, I can tell you, we're probably Hughes Crab, Harrison, Wixon, Russets, anything that we could pull out of our orchard because we didn't do anything else with them. So they went into cider.
Those are our original 3. Colloquially, is that I called the OG 3.
Ooh,
I think it means original gangster.
Okay. Whatever.
I needed an easier shorthand way to refer to them. OG 3 words.
Okay. I didn't see the shorthand.
So yeah, let us know what your favorite was, and any questions, let us know on the chat here on Facebook, and another virtual tasting in the books. I really do like this one.
Using cheese.
Ragged Mountain does go with cheese. I think
All
we
of them go
actually
with
have
cheese.
that. I think we have that in our tasting notes that Ragged Mountain goes with cheese plates. It's very broad. Well, thank you all for joining us. Look for the options next month. As I said, we're hoping to do something separate from the bottle bundle and do something a little bit more special. And so look out for that tasting package. We'll get it out there sometime within the week. And yeah, thanks for joining us. Hope everyone has a great night. Last words?
Cheers.
Cheers.
As always. Yeah.